see that we have present, rather than going around, I'll just say Carol Kelly and Beth Dolezal. Charles Brooks, I guess at this point is still a guest. We have to do something about that.
Yeah.
Kara Fleck, David DeQuincio, and that's it. Is that all we have? Let's see. Is there any member who is not present? Zoe. Zoe is not present. So Zoe Johnson. All right, well, maybe we'll be lucky and she will join us later. I do have a suggestion, and that is that if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. There is Zoe. So we have a full roster of members.
My apologies. I couldn't figure out how to turn my microphone on.
Yes, I've had that same problem. Okay, now that we have done the roll call, let's review, edit, and approve the agenda. The agenda was sent around to you. Several of you sent suggestions, which I will follow. Are there any changes that you feel need to occur? Hearing nothing, we'll deem the agenda approved and plunge right into it. We have no speaker I'm sorry, the next item on the agenda is comments by members of the public. And I suppose the only participant who can be classified as such is Charles. I had hoped that Elvia might join us for a couple of remarks on electric vehicles, and maybe she will later, I'm not sure. But Charles, do you have anything to say before we continue? You are muted. You are still muted. There you go.
There we go. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, now you're fine.
Okay. Not at the moment. I don't have anything.
Okay. We will plunge forward then. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I hope the others will get around to it as well. The next item on the agenda is we'd like to have speakers come in, and this month we do not have one. But I know Dave DeQuincio is working on that, and maybe this would be a good time for him to just tell us what the situation is. Do you have any prospects lined up that you think would be good for appearing before the board?
As with a lot of things like this, it takes a lot of push up front to get anything moving. So, you know, I've got some messages in and things like some emails out, but I don't have anybody actively committing yet. So I'll just keep shaking the tree until I, you know, some fruit starts to drop out of it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I invite everybody else, all other members of the board, to keep an ear open for people who would be good to speak to us on topics of interest to the city of Annapolis. Kara, you're in a different milieu over there in College Park. You must have all sorts of good connections that might contribute usefully. All right, next item in regular business, approval of the minutes. Thank you so much, Tom, for doing this. As I said before, it's a thankless job, but I thank you anyway. I don't see you on the screen, Tom. Are you still around?
I haven't seen him at all.
He was here a moment ago.
Oh, he was?
Yes.
Okay. I must have been writing or something.
Ryan, do you show him as participating?
No, I did not see him. And unfortunately, I don't see him in attendees as well, which is where the wait list would be.
Well, he was here a moment ago. I think he's on the Eastern Shore, and there may be a connection problem over there.
It might be. I'm going to keep a watch on that. I'm also going to promote Ashley to panelist.
I'm sorry, you're promoting whom?
Ashley Leonard.
Who is Ashley Leonard? Oh, Ashley Leonard is the attorney. Yes, I remember. Thank you so much for joining us. Ashley, is your audio on? I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, yep, it's on.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, no problem.
All right.
You're on mute. Kurt, you're muted. There, you're still muted. There you go.
Got it. Sorry. Any changes, additions to the minutes, or can we approve them? Motion to approve?
Seconded. So moved.
Aye.
Aye.
I don't see any nays. All right, Kara. All right, thanks so much. On we go. By the way, on this secretary function, I had a conversation at your suggestion with both Hillary and the head of the Transportation Committee, Ellie Tierney, about getting a city staff assigned to us to take care of the note-taking, preparation of minutes. And it did not go very well. They're unwilling to make that commitment at this time, but they did suggest that we make a request of the Transportation Department to have somebody serve that function, because that is the custom in a number of other boards and commissions. So I will make that request. I don't see Kwaku here tonight, but I will speak to either him or his boss at a later time. The next item on the agenda is a report on related transportation groups, and I just wanted to fill you in on a number of things that I have been participating in, because they are of interest to and may affect all of you in your work. The first thing that I wanted to mention, and I had hoped that Elvia Thompson might contribute to this. Oh, I see Tom is there again. Hello. I thanked you for your work on the minutes. The minutes are approved. I don't know whether you were on or severed at that point, but we moved on.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. The a report on several related transportation groups. There was sort of a rump group that was started by Diane Butler, Elvia Thompson, and a number of other people to discuss electric vehicles and what could be done in the city of Annapolis to start transforming the fleet of Annapolis-owned vehicles to be electrified. And that would include not only inspections vehicles, but possibly police cars, buses, and so forth. There was one initial discussion. All I can say is that has started, and I'm hopeful that Elvia will bring us into that and tell us exactly what's going on. And I invite any of you who are interested in electrifying the Annapolis fleet to get in touch with Elvia. The second transportation group that I wanted to let you know about is that I was appointed some time ago to something called the Bay Bridge Restoration Advisory Group. The Bay Bridge has been under construction, and it has an advisory group because the reconstruction program has had effects on communities with lanes closed and so forth. And somehow I got appointed to that thing. One meeting after I appeared at this group, the board was dissolved. It was dissolved because an act of the legislature dissolved it, but then reconstituted in a slightly different form. And I learned from Lisa Rodvian, who is our council person here in Annapolis, that the county council has requested that I be reappointed, and apparently it's kind of a done deal. So we have a seat on the Bay Bridge Restoration Advisory Board for those of you who are interested in anything related to the bridge reconstruction. One of the things that I want to bring to the Bay Bridge discussion is that to relieve congestion, we've not taken advantage of surge pricing. There's a fixed price at all times of the day, regardless of traffic. And many jurisdictions have taken on this congestion problem by using surge pricing to move traffic to the off peaks. The administration is apparently antagonistic to that idea, but I'm going to do what I can to plant the seed and see that it grows, because it is a fair and equitable way of distributing a scarce resource.
Well, you know, a few years ago, didn't they do something like that? And they also, maybe they even, I'm trying to think, they even dropped the toll, say, you know, like after 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock, trying to get people to go later. And they didn't do it during the day, but they did something at night. And I thought it was like even drop the toll altogether, or certainly they dropped it really low. But at that time, we didn't have, the new lanes had not been put in, the Easy Pass lanes.
Yes.
So everyone had to go through the toll booths. This was probably, maybe time flies when you're having fun, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But they did try that stuff and they found that it didn't really work. That's why I think they dropped it. They did it just in the summer.
Yeah. Apparently there's a Saturday changeover date at the beaches. This is a big driver of the surge. I think there's been some move to try to spread the changeover date so that it doesn't all occur on one day. But I don't know as much about that as I
Yeah,
should.
some is Sunday. I know some is Sunday, but the major is Saturday. You are right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then the two more things that I should tell you about. I've been appointed to the Anne Arundel County Bicycle Commission. So I'm on that with John Corin, heads that thing. He's a wonderful person. He's done a great job in not only coordinating activities among volunteer public groups and also the county, but they're going gangbusters and writing grant applications so that we can do something about building bicycle infrastructure in the future that is safe. There's a well worked out bicycle map for Anne Arundel County with priorities for construction. There are some good segments, a lot of uncompleted segments, and the idea is to mobilize action in a coordinated way to fill out the map so that we can really get around. And not as a recreation trail, but transportation. The emphasis is on transportation, not recreation, which I think is totally appropriate. And then the final thing is that a man who used to be on this board, Arjan van Andel.
What?
His name is Arjan van Andel.
Oh, Ian?
No, Arjan, not Ian. No, he's
Okay.
Dutch. And the Dutch name is Arjan van Andel. And he used to be on this transportation board. He's
He
now
was.
on the county transportation board, and he's chairing it for the time being. We met, talked, decided it would be a good idea to improve coordination. So at their last meeting, I sat in, and I would like to extend an invitation to him to sit in on our meetings, if that is all right with the group.
Sounds great.
All right. They're doing good stuff, and we should stay connected because the transportation networks clearly influence each other.
It reminds me, Kurt, that I think early on when you were setting us up for responsibilities that I tentatively volunteered to attend the meetings of
Yes.
their transportation board. I think you might remember that better than I do, and because of what's transpired, I haven't literally done anything. I'm just thinking right now, they are probably Zoomed just as this one is.
They are. That's exactly.
And I
what's
don't
going on.
mind sharing that responsibility if you become more assertive in, you're partnering with them. But I've always thought that idea of yours is a good one to have pretty ongoing contact with them, even if it's just, symbolic.
That's great. I will speak to him about that.
And would you find out, whether I could be a Zoom participant if that's how they.
I will do that. Okay. Legislation. Tom, you have been working legislation and you've got all sorts of things going on. So would you like to take the floor?
So with regards to 07-20, the Rules and City Government Committee had that on their agenda at their last meeting, which was on June the 9th. All action has been postponed on that piece of legislation, which, as you recall, is basically to establish loading zones so the various rideshare platforms can pick up and drop off patrons in Annapolis. All action has been postponed on that legislation because its sponsor, Duane Gray, has yet failed to meet with either the city attorney and the Department of Transportation to work on amendments to the language. So until such time as Councilman Gray does what he has to do to submit the amendments, then nothing's going to move forward on that legislation. On the topic of legislation, in a note that I sent everybody the other day, I provided you all a little cheat sheet. It was called the legislative process. If you're going to be involved in making the sausage in Annapolis, you might want to take a look at that cheat sheet and know exactly how the process plays out. So that kind of updates you on that legislation and gives you a sense of how you might want to participate in making any future legislation. I'll have more later when we get into new business.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Tom. I wanted to thank everybody who reviewed 2020. That was the ordinance which would create a deputy city manager for resilience and sustainability, abolishing one position and transforming it into something which is to provide coordination over environmental matters and then resiliency and sustainability concerns as well. We voted to support the legislation without much in terms of specific language. And I was thanked by both the mayor and the sponsor for this thing. I expect it to pass, but you never know. We'll see what happens. And then does anybody else have anything on legislation? All right, moving on. Resolutions. At the last meeting, David DeQuinzio made several suggestions, and he has followed through to create draft language that we can consider to pass as resolutions of the Transportation Board. And I don't know whether you distributed, Dave. I did, but rather late, and I don't know whether people have had a chance to look at it yet, but would you like to take the floor and discuss all three of those?
Yeah, sure. I finished them late last night. No, I wanted you to take a look at them before distributing them. But did everybody receive them?
Yes, and I reviewed mine.
I reviewed mine as well, Dave.
Okay, so let's begin per the order of the agenda. the the Maryland Transit Caucus, since I last or since the last meeting, I discovered that the Maryland Transit Caucus does in fact now have its own website that lists that has a section that lists the members. And so was able to confirm what I had said at the last meeting, which was that former Delegate Kane was the only one from our area that supported it, or that joined. And so I think that I tried in all three of these to strip down the language and not, go into extraneous, make extraneous points. I tried to keep it pretty well streamlined. And for this one, it's pretty simple. If we want state money to help improve transit here in Annapolis, it's going to look strange when we ask the state for money and our elected representatives in the assembly aren't members of this caucus. So, and hopefully I did what I said I wanted to do, which was keep the language simple and straightforward. And it remains the case that I've not been able to, I still don't have any answers from Senator Elfreth or Delegate Henson as to, are they going to join, or they don't want to join, or whatever the case is. So
I thought they were already joined. I thought didn't they send out something saying they had joined?
I'm signed up for all of their emails, and they're not listed on the caucus website as members.
True, but I thought they sent something out saying that they were, though.
I received no such thing.
Okay.
I would love to be proven wrong.
No, it's just, I thought there was something that came out that said that they were members of that. And then when you said that they weren't listed, I thought, oh boy, there's another case, people not keeping up with the website, and whatever. So I don't know.
Well, that's a small but important point, isn't it? We should know whether
Yes.
they're members or not.
Yeah. And of course you've asked Dave, right? And
Yes.
you're just not getting a response.
Not getting a response.
Okay.
Could someone like Kurt or you, David, approach the newest delegate, the lady whose name I keep forgetting, who
Dana Jones.
Jones, yeah.
for assignments, ways to go to make her mark. Is that inappropriate?
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to try.
I would go, I would just, for my own reasons, I would go beyond those other two for, if only the least harsh analysis. They're very busy women, especially Shanika right now.
Right.
And
It doesn't take much to read your email and just go back and say, yes, no.
well, that's a matter of,
Yeah. And that is the job they signed up for, and ran for, which is to be responsive to constituents.
I'm certainly not excusing them, but I'm facing the realities of what I see on an operating basis and recognizing that the times are demanding. And I'm also urging us to make our own demands. This is something we consider important, and we may have to, in a way, lobby our own representatives to take us more seriously. And that in a certain way comes out of an experience, my long experience on this board, where we did have to articulate and, almost campaign to be recognized as a significant voice in the, transportation mobility picture. And so I'm actually encouraging that, not in a, in a critical way, or one where I'm going to give somebody a hard time because they're not reading all their emails, but because we could do something more proactive. So let's talk.
Dave, do I have it right that there are a few T's and I's that need yet to be dotted on this before you're comfortable in our voting it and forwarding it as a resolution of the board?
I'm ready for it as is.
What about the factual thing? Are we recommending something that might already have happened?
Well, I could well. Then the worst that can happen is they say, hey, silly, I am a member. Well, I don't have any evidence of that.
Right.
And maybe
Okay.
if we
Dave, I
push
think
it
you've done a
forward,
great
it would,
job on all three.
yeah. But if we push it forward, maybe that exactly will make them respond.
And I'll tell you, I've attended some of the town halls and things. I'll tell you frankly, my impression of Sarah as our senator, if it isn't education, she's not interested.
Oh, too bad.
That's,
Needs to be well-rounded.
and when I spoke at the town hall on these kinds of issues, she was, I won't say rude, but somewhat dismissive of their importance.
All right,
It was
Dave, would you like
bothered by
to
that.
make a motion that we vote this resolution forward and so that we can go on the record?
I motion we vote this resolution forward.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Great.
real quick before we move on, has anyone reached out to the Maryland Transit Caucus to ask them if their list on their website is updated? Because if not, I can certainly do that and maybe they'll be more inclined to answer. Maybe they have more time on their hands.
That sounds like the most reasonable of suggestions.
Yes,
will-
I think that's a good suggestion.
That's great.
Yes.
Cara, do it.
So is that in lieu of adopting the resolution?
Well, we've adopted the resolution, but let's double check.
Okay.
Right, because the
I will
resolution.
do that.
So you'll reach out to.
I will
Maryland
reach out to
Transit
them.
Caucus?
Right.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right, next resolution, Dave.
Okay, the next one, if you remember it, I'm sorry if you hear a dog barking in the background. She is loud. But the purpose of the next resolution is to encourage the city to adopt the NACTO blueprint for autonomous urbanism.
Can you say what NACTO? You should always tell us what
You're
it
right.
is before you use the acronym. I'm like,
Right.
okay.
Right, okay, yes, National Association of City Transportation Officials. So this would, Kwaku may be a member, for example. And these are individuals who do the day-to-day work of whether it's planning new parking meters, with new technology for capacity management, or trying to figure out what kind of mixture of asphalt is going to hold up in their particular climate, or whatever the, they're not so much a think tank. They are a working group of people that day in and day out deal with issues at a very hands-on level. And the reason they put so much effort into developing this document is they're concerned, as am I, that this emerging autonomous vehicle industry will descend upon cities, small and large, and do what's in their best interests, not necessarily what's in the city's best interest. And if cities don't lay down some ground rules, then they'll be able to say, well, no one told us, we couldn't show up in the middle of the night and dump truckloads of scooters, without telling anybody. Or, no one told us we couldn't send a fleet of, dozens of AVs into your city. And the value of this blueprint is that it lets multiple cities speak with one voice by pointing to the blueprint. And that way the autonomous vehicle industry can have some consistency. So, when they go out and look for opportunities to partner with cities and towns on autonomous vehicle technology, they will not have to ask. They'll already know, those places that sign on to the blueprint, they'll know what the rules are. And it seems like such a better approach than one place than every town and city trying to do their own thing, and then the industry is looking at dozens of different sets of rules. And so it may not be. Okay. So Kwaku says he's not a member. Okay. Sorry about that, Kwaku. Anyway, this blueprint, I'm sure, will be updated, and it may, there may be things in it that we quibble with or whatever, but it's early enough in that industry that I think it's more important to get some kind of policy on the table, and then edit it, modify it, adapt it as we begin to see the first deployments of the technology and start learning. But if we don't do something soon, the horse will be out of the barn. And I think we're better off getting something potentially imperfect on the table than getting left behind and having to play catch up.
That sounds so reasonable, assuming that it does not become an inhibitor to the development and implementation of the technology. And I know that's not what you have in mind. And done right, it won't do that.
Yeah, it's not. It lays out, and it doesn't micromanage the industry. It lays out some criteria and with enough breadth. But I guess the bottom line message to it is, hey, you're a guest in our house, and if you come up with a technology and a way to deploy it that is responsive to everyone's needs and doesn't make things worse, then you'll be welcomed. But if you come in with a my way or the highway, pardon the pun, approach to it, then it's going to be a problem. I mean, that's the core message behind it.
One of the messages of the lady who spoke a few weeks ago, I was so excited about, and now I can't even remember her name. Who was the speaker?
Shelley Rowe.
Yeah, she emphasized not only how rapid this transition is going to occur, but the very feature you're talking about, that when these well-meaning, and technological contributors, the car companies themselves, hit the local communities, they were going to be as perplexed and disorganized as the communities are, because they would have to they'd have to approach each city or each community or each municipality differently, and that would take away some of their efficiency measures that would contribute to the smoother implementation of their programs. So I can imagine that the industry would welcome that sort of centralization of the structure that they're going to go into, and hopefully there wouldn't be any trouble at the different governmental levels of competition or isolation or refusal to cooperate. And a group like this, a more neutral sort of professional group, without any political or government or bureaucratic agenda, seems like a perfect way to bring that that central point into at least a more central point into the introduction of the whole transition of the whole implementation. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
I think,
Any other discussion? Yeah, Tom.
I think a key point here is the work has already been done. And as Dave points out in the resolution, it would be very difficult and very costly for Annapolis to take this on itself. So there's only goodness behind adopting this blueprint. And I think what Dave has written, I'm very willing to move it forward as is.
I second
Okay.
that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Congratulations. And David, I'll work with you for the final steps in putting the resolutions in final form. And then the third one has to do with a House bill and the MARC train expansion.
Right. And it may, it would be easy to say, well, what does that have to do with us? But I would argue that it does, in that if we want to have better transit connectivity, not only within the city, but outside the city to nearby points, the case for that is better when there are stronger adjoining systems to connect with. And for example, last year, just for a little bit of background, so at one time Annapolis was its own area for the purposes of the federal transportation funding allocation mechanism, but at some point, I think it was in the 90s, it got folded into the Baltimore MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization. That I think happened with the enactment of a prior version of the Federal Transportation Authorization Bill. It's got an acronym and I can't remember what it stands for. But the whole point of the thrust of it was to improve regional coordination. And so we're not the only smaller city that got folded into a larger metropolitan area. And so the organization that administers that is called the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. And they have what used to be called the Citizens Advisory Council. It has a new name now, but I served on that for a couple of years. And basically what they do is develop various projects that they think they can get federal funding for. And their focus is 80 to 85% roads. And the reason for that is that's what the money's available for. But they do have, so they publish each year a transportation improvement program. It's sort of like a running tally of projects that they are pursuing. And they also produce a long range plan. But in the transportation improvement program currently in effect is a study of bus rapid transit in the US 50 corridor that would head our way. And that's, you know, I'm may not be sold that BRT or bus rapid transit is the right solution, but I'm happy that they're at least looking, that they're putting some real money, some study money toward something to have an alternative to get to DC other than by driving or using one of the commuter hour only buses. But anyway, one of the attractions or draws of a bus rapid transit solution or some kind of transit solution is it would stop at New Carrollton, where you have connectivity to lots of bus routes, the MARC commuter rail system, Amtrak, and when it opens, the Purple Line. And so I think it, in general, is smart for this board to support improvements that down the road will, by virtue of connectivity, offer transit riders here additional options to access more destinations by greater network connectivity. And so the legislation, the MARC Improvement Bill, that was not forced upon the Hogan administration. That was developed by the Hogan administration's transportation department officials. And it was passed by the General Assembly, and it was among about 20 or so bills that the governor vetoed on the basis of state budget impact due to the virus. I didn't see any road projects canceled as a result of state budget issues. But in the same vein as we want, as wanting our elected officials to be on record as supporting transit in general by being members of the Transit Caucus, I think it's appropriate for us, for future connectivity persons, to at least ask that that they support overriding that veto. And I have tried and had a great deal of difficulty finding a consistent story about the veto override process. For example, there are reports that in January of this year, bills vetoed by the governor at various points in 2019 were overridden by action of the General Assembly, in January 2020. In other words, several months had passed, and I tried to find out whether there's a clock that in other words, when a governor vetoes a bill passed by the Assembly, does that set up a 60 or 90 or some 120 day or some number clock of days where if the General Assembly does not convene to vote to override that veto is permanent.
David, this is an important technical point, and we happen to have sitting among us Ashley Leonard, who may have an understanding of this process. Are you still there, Ashley? Well, we'll see. At any rate, go ahead. It's an important technical thing.
Right.
I don't know whether we're starting all over again because the legislature has ended and we're in a new session, or whether there is still an opportunity for veto override. I suspect the answer is no, but it's just a guess.
So yeah, I would love to hear from somebody that is more knowledgeable about General Assembly procedure than I am.
Okay, what do you want to do? And
Well, I could rewrite it to just make it more general that, that I could rewrite it to say that the ask is not to override the veto, but the ask is more general to help, support the enactment of this legislation at the earliest possible time.
yeah, I think that generalizing it by not tying it to a specific bill or to a veto might be a good thing to do.
And there's not a great level of time pressure on this, so I don't mind rewriting it and presenting it again at the next meeting.
Okay, let's come back to that.
All right, and we do have a July meeting, right?
For the moment, yes.
Okay. And on that same subject, when I was on planning commission, it was practice not to have an August meeting. But I guess we could choose to have an August meeting, or is that a tradition?
I think it's a tradition. I don't, Transportation Board didn't have an August meeting. Parking Commission didn't have an August meeting. In fact, sometimes we didn't have a July meeting either, you know, so. I don't know how anybody else feels about it.
You know,
We're
I'm
kind
happy
of stuck
to
at
go
home
with the
these
wishes
days.
of the board. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. All right, well, for the moment, let's plan for July and keep August open as a possible vacation month. Does that sound reasonable?
Right, I'm not going anywhere.
Fine, thanks. Thanks a lot, Dave. Let's now go around the table, and everybody who is participating now has an opportunity to speak whatever is on your mind. I'll just do it clockwise, starting from the, well, I don't know, top left. Carol, is there anything else further you would like to say? You are muted. You are muted.
No, I don't have anything specific to add. Thank you.
Okay. Beth?
The only thing I've got to say is to Tom, actually, since he and I had our nice telcon about parking, and I've got his, I printed off some parts of what he sent in his like 9-page attachment. And I just I want him and I to get together. I've got some comments and things I think we could do. And so based on that, so that's all I've got. What do you say, Tom? Okay.
We're going to be discussing all of that. We have a meeting right now, so.
No, yeah, but you and I I would like to discuss some parts with you before we present them. I mean, I know we're going to talk tonight, but there's some other things. But if it doesn't, if it turns out that it all gets resolved tonight, that's fine. But I just don't see it. Obviously, you don't like talking to me, so that's okay. That's okay.
No, my preference actually is to provide as much as I can in the written form, so that we literally are all working on the same sheet of music. So I try to provide background and context,
yes,
and hope that in advance folks would do the read aheads, and then we can focus our time on the facts. If I failed to cover the points that we discussed the other night, shame on me.
No, it's not that. It's that by reading them, and I see some things that I think we can do. You and I are on like a little subcommittee. And so therefore, I would think you and I would talk and get ourselves in the same place. Then yes, it can be written up and put to the whole board. But it's the way I mean, anytime I've ever worked on a subcommittee of some sort, it's the way I've always worked. The little subcommittee works. It comes to agreement on things. It sets things up, and it puts it forward. Now Dave's doing his by himself, but if he was working with someone, he would need to talk with them so that they could agree on what is being put forward. And that's what I want to do with you. If you don't want to do that with me, that's perfectly fine. I'll figure out another way. Don't worry about it.
Did I fail to capture the essence of our conversation?
Some new stuff has come to my attention, Tom. New.
Very good.
Well, that's what we talked about the other night. Okay.
Very good. Well, please share that with the board.
When we get to this part, we'll talk.
Okay, that item is on the agenda. We'll get to it in a couple of minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, next, Kara, you have the floor.
So this is a question for the group, and if no one knows the answer, I'm happy to follow up to learn more. But I got an email from the Pace Bike Share on June 1st indicating that the service would be ending. And I was curious if anyone happened to know if the city intends to bring in another micro mobility provider, and if so, who they're looking at, if they're thinking about also introducing electric scooters with that new provider. Does anyone have any insight into that?
I have the tiniest amount of information on that. You're quite right. Pace has pulled out, and they are either are about to or have already pulled out all of the bicycles. It turned out they didn't even own the bicycles. They leased them from somebody else, which was a surprise to me. Because there were discussions in the city about having somebody purchase the equipment and just relabel them, keep using the same stuff, but that's not possible. There have been discussions with at least one other vendor. That vendor, whose name I can't remember, is a station-based operator. That is, instead of having scooters or bicycles, which you leave any place you like because they're geolocated and can be picked up later, these have a number of fixed stations, and you must return the apparatus to that station. That's considerably less attractive than the ones that can be dropped anywhere. But the answer is yes, there are discussions, but I don't know much about it. Would you like to delve into that?
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in what kinds of regulations will surround the operation of electric scooters within the city of Annapolis, just because I know the state recognizes electric scooters as a vehicle that belongs on the road and not on sidewalks, and how that would be enforced within the city. And, you know, if there's going to be requirements for helmets, whatever. I just know that electric scooters can get hairy and become a nuisance if there's not a lot of regulation surrounding it. So
Brian Callahan participated in our meeting, I guess, last time, and he seems to be the point man on discussions of this type. I suggest you sit down with him and find out where they're going.
great. If you could just give me his contact information, I'd love to get in touch with him.
You bet, I will do that.
That's it for me.
Thanks. Tom, anything else?
Nothing, Kurt.
David, have you finished?
Yes, yeah, I finished everything about the resolutions. And then just, I want everybody to be aware that to be skeptical when you read articles about transit ridership declines due to the virus. There's some indications that some of the transit opponent groups think they can seize on the virus as a rationale to argue against transit. Some of the big city systems have implemented cleaning, using some pretty advanced technology to clean and disinfect sterilized transit vehicles and things like that. But there's some spin out there about how dangerous it is or isn't to ride transit in the pandemic era that we're in. So just be aware that people are trying to spin that issue. That's, there are other things I know that are going on, but I've already had the floor a considerable amount of time this evening, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Let's see. Charles, do you have anything else? I know you're not a member yet, Drat, but if you have anything further, go. You are muted.
Let me try that again. That was pretty interesting. Do you have any more information on those comments about public transit and the pandemic? I believe-
Yeah, if you go to usa.streetsblog.org, there is, that's where I have seen this issue covered. But I can send you some specific links.
Okay, I'll check it out.
And then finally, I just wanted to invite Ashley Leonard, if you are still here and listening, to jump in. She may be otherwise occupied. All right. We already covered outside speakers. The next item is Transportation Department update. Kwaku, I think, is on the is attending, but I haven't heard from him yet.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Indeed.
Okay. We are in the process of doing the monthly report for the month of May. We hope to get it done by the end of this week, and then I will send it to you, Kurt, and for distribution. In terms of general updates, we did participate in the Community Transportation Association of America. They did have a mini virtual expo where the emphasis was about transit, restarting transit after the shutdown. And the emphasis was on what kind of safety measures various transit agencies, both small and large, are taking. And most importantly, what are they doing to communicate that kind of safety measures to the general public? Because there is the perception, as David was saying, that now because of the virus, it's not safe to ride transit, it's better for you to get a vehicle and so on and so forth. So for 2 days, the emphasis was on how to actually get back the ridership that we have lost because of the pandemic. The other interesting thing that came up was the fact that, Kurt, if you will recall, we had a meeting where there was discussion of we running empty large buses. In fact, it appears that large buses are going to be norm because of the whole idea of social distancing within the bus itself. Because what they're doing is that some of the buses are being run at about 15% capacity, not because they cannot get many more people, but because they want to ensure the safety of the customers. So that is another trend that is going on for agencies with smaller buses. Some of them are running 2 buses on the same route, basically to ensure the safety of the customers that do take public transportation. And another thing that came up was the whole idea of fair payment. As much as possible, we want to limit any interaction between the drivers or the operators and then the customers. On that front, Annapolis Transit is way ahead because we do have electronic fare boards where you don't have to have any interaction with the operator. If you're putting in money, you can put it in. It will tell you how much you have put it in. If you already have purchased a day pass or a bus pass, you can scan it and it will take it from there. So for that 2 days, the emphasis was how to basically make transit much safer to run. And that was interesting because we have another participant from Maryland who did point out what the governor was saying, that do not take public transportation, which is contrary to what most of the transit agencies around the country are trying to do, to basically tell people that it is safe to take public transportation. So that's all that I have for now.
Well, I assume that face coverings are a norm and required as sort of the minimum that you must do to achieve safety. What about other things like reconfiguring the buses to provide for partitions that weren't there before, or other means that increase safety?
Yeah, for the partition, we are looking at the drivers. for our current buses that we have, what we are trying to do is that like each other seat, you cannot use it. In fact, we just look at a draft policies in terms of going back to full service, where we will put X marks on certain seats so that they are not used by the riders to ensure the social distances, and also to prevent the driver basically trying to enforce the social distance within the bus. So face covering is a must. Social distances is one thing that we are also encouraging by putting X's on certain seats that will not be used. The other thing is with our ADA riders, because for some of the ADA riders, the driver may have to get close to that person. So in addition to face masks, you provide them with a face shield and also advise as much as possible to minimize any contact with the customers. In terms of looking ahead, we are looking into the possibility of other shields, and also to have maybe, because currently most of our buses have only one door, which is at the front of the bus. Potentially we can have another door at the rear where that would be for exit only, so that you don't have people passing each other while some of them are getting out and others are getting in. So these are some of the things we have thought about, and we are considering it together with other transit providers in the States.
What's the status on resuming a full schedule rather than the Saturday schedule?
I think the mayor did ask the Vero department, especially those departments that were severely or significantly affected by the virus. So we have submitted our plan to the mayor. I believe it depends upon the governor's announcement, and then we will hear back from the mayor. But we are ready. If we are asked to provide full service tomorrow or next week, we all have our drivers ready. We all have our vehicles clean and sanitized. So we are ready to go. We are waiting to hear from the city government.
Kwaku, is there any plan for on your website for there to be some sort of FAQ that just explains the measures that you're taking to protect passengers and reduce the spread of the virus?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. In fact, last week, Friday, staff did meet, and one of the things we decided to do is to write something for the city PIO to put it out for the public to know what is happening, and also we will put the similar information at the website to let the public know that it is safe to ride the transit system.
That's good. I feel like there's just like not enough communication you can do about that with this particular circumstance. So
you are absolutely right. In fact, during the CTA mini expo, that was one of the main topics that were discussed extensively. The transit agencies may be doing a lot of work, but how does the public know? So the idea of taking what we are doing to the general public is a very, very important thing. And some of them have come out with very innovative ways that they shared with other transit agencies that we can look into and see how you can actually apply, modify, or adapt to your specific need. So as we get ready and waiting to hear from the mayor, we will put something together to send it back to the city public information officer for review and publication.
thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much.
right.
By the way, because Zoe's picture is not here, I neglected to include her around the table. Zoe, are you still here?
Kurt, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, because I talked a couple times and I going in and off a mute because I had to call in on my phone because I just couldn't stay connected. So I apologize. Having a lot of trouble tonight. The only update, or not an update, but item I would like to bring up is I think that the city is learning a lot about traffic flow downtown and special events and opening up streets to more pedestrian traffic, that I wanted to see about just thinking about how to encourage the city or doing it ourselves to get some documentation and lessons learned about all of these, areas that are open and how it's working, and, whether, residents are, like the situation and they want to see it on a permanent basis, once we're through this, this pandemic. But I think that I'm hearing, how people like it, but, it's also, obviously, disrupting traffic flow. But I think anything that we can do to sort of use this as a test opportunity in sort of gauging public interest, but also from a transportation perspective, learning, how it could function or what it would mean for some of these to continue on beyond this current recovery.
Well, I would certainly like to know that. I have no clue whether it's happening or who is doing it. Do you?
Okay, may I say something? In terms of lessons learned, if you will recall, for any emergency, whether it's a hurricane or virus or pandemic, the Office of Emergency Management actually coordinates everything, where that particular office brings in all city departments and functions to strategize. And as a participant, what I have learned is that after every event, the group actually reconvenes to talk about lessons learned, how we can use the information we have gathered to improve the plans and move forward with that. So I believe sometime in the near future, OEM will again reconvene with all city departments, everybody, to present their lessons learned, and then they will put it together in the form of a document. So if the board is interested, if this happens, I will let you know, and I will check with the OEM director how the board can get a copy of the lessons learned sometime in the near future.
Zoe, were you instead interested in things like reconfiguring traffic patterns, dining outside, closing streets, moving to more outdoor activities than before? Is that the sort of thing you were thinking of?
Well, I just know that I think as we've had the discussions about City Dock and re-envisioning City Dock prior to this pandemic, there was a lot of interest in these types of activities, yet there's discussions either way, or, opinions either way on whether, it's good or bad for transportation access and residents downtown. And I think as we move out of the pandemic, I think that there will still be a continued interest in from Ward 1 as well as other city dwellers to see this sort of activity continue. So I think the more information we can gather or document while it's sort of fresh in mind, and even if it's our own thought process, it might be valuable just to, because this is a case study that we haven't had before.
Zoe, this is Carol. My specific recommendation is that one of us or the board reach out by getting involved in whatever comes out of the process that Kwaku was describing, in which the Department of Emergency Management sort of assesses and summarizes for future information. But the group that would most benefit from this kind of analysis right now, in a hands-on action way, would be the City Dock Committee, the group, the
right. Mm-hmm.
And so if we, they remain a somewhat informal group, partly because there are so many of them, but they were structured into various committees, and I'm sure there's one that was focused on transportation and downtown and traffic and such. So if some sort of dialogue could be set up between the transportation board and the member or the members of that committee, that would involve them and us in what comes out of the emergency management analysis eventually, I think it could be very useful to what will be picked up eventually, again, about mobility in downtown Annapolis in relation to the changes that are hopefully still going to be made at City Dock. that whole process, even though it's fairly broad, and I don't mean to make it too general, it would be a very valuable one. But I don't know that because of the, the disorganization of everything right now, or not the diffusion of everything, that process would necessarily happen without individual attention. So I would encourage you maybe and Kwaku, to the extent that it would work within his, his professional role, and us as a board to be aware of this, this point in the evaluation of what's transpired. Because what did transpire, and I think you're capturing this, and I don't want to go on about it too much, is that the cars were gone, the people were gone, the streets were empty. And, there was kind of a blank slate for a while, in a month or 6 weeks, when we could see what downtown, an alternate downtown could be.
Right. Well put. Yeah, well, I can take that role. I participate on the City Dock Action Committee, and I'm also on the city, leadership team for COVID, and I'm hearing about the recovery zone. So I'm hearing a lot of the information, and that's maybe why I'm thinking about this. But just while it's fresh in mind, and as if you take an evening to walk around safely downtown, you begin to see what it looks like. And I know that this will continue. There will be discussions. I'm not going to belabor this anymore, but the more we can think about some lessons or, our own observations and hearing from people, but from a transportation perspective, what it means. So that's all I have.
Thanks for that. But while we have you on the phone, Zoe, could you tell us something about the bicycle trail extension, which the Navy is involved in discussions with the city on, and what its status is?
So the Navy, the city, the county, and state highway have been formed a sort of informal group to look at the feasibility of a designated bike path or shared use path between King George Street Bridge over College Creek to the intersection of King George Street and 450, then to the left to Taylor Avenue, and then to the right to the Naval Academy Bridge. And so this was a major corridor of interest to Bike AAA as well as the city of Annapolis. The Navy recognizes that there's, heavy usage by, midshipmen and other folks, recreating, as well as bicyclists that are coming down the B&A trail and accessing into downtown Annapolis or heading towards the stadium. And so we've been meeting we've only had maybe 2 or 3 meetings over the course of the last year and a half. And after we had 2 meetings, and the city and the county formally requested the State Highway Administration to do a feasibility study to determine, what the bike paths sort of look and feel and what may be feasible. And they've issued a draft report that laid out 3 alternatives, and one of the alternatives had an A and a B. So I guess that'd be 4 alternatives, with a recommendation that that the alternative 3 was the most preferred. And that was, sort of a combination of an on-road bike designated lane and then a shared use bike path, and kind of a combination. So it wouldn't be a bike path through the whole corridor. In some places you would have a designated bike trail, some places you have a sidewalk, and other times you'd have a bike trail on the road. SHA is taking some general comments from the work group, in addition to some that we're compiling from the Navy to back into consideration before they issue a final report. But once that occurs, or once the report is final, then the hard work really has to start, because there are some very complicated Navy real estate issues through that corridor. The entirety of the roadway network is on Navy land. It isn't within the existing state designated road right of way. there's questions about, state, the state could fund the project, but then the adjoining landowner, that'd be the Navy, would have to take on maintenance. There's just a lot of things to work through. There's also some, issues associated with, there's no funding, and the state has funding through their bike pedestrian pathway program. I'm not sure what the formal name is, but they don't have money for design. So so we'd have to figure that out. We'd also have to look at some issues associated with stormwater, as well as engineering. So we still have a ways to go on it, but everybody is continuing to work together and really sees the value in this project. But at best, we're probably a couple years out. But we still have a pretty dedicated group that's interested in working to move it forward. So I can, when the draft feasibility study is available, I can share that with you. And then I can keep you all on this group abreast of the project as it moves forward.
Thank you so much for that summary.
Yeah, yeah. The thing for this
goes through it.
Yeah, the thing for this group is it isn't within the city limits, actually. Maybe it's on Navy land. So it's not within the city, it's not within the county, it's on Navy land. So, but both the city and the county, the state highway and the Navy are all working together to move it forward.
Just a personal note, I have a Navy pass, and during the height of the pandemic, when everything was closed down, I had the pleasure of riding a bicycle throughout the Naval Academy grounds. There wasn't a single vehicle, a single person in sight anywhere. But I know it's closed off to everybody else. It's kind of too bad, but I know the security concerns prevail. Next item on the agenda is new business, and I gather Tom and Beth have been talking about this at some length.
It's up to you, Tom.
So, first of all, folks, have you all read the email that I sent yesterday on this topic?
I plead guilty. I have not read it because I was on a boat until a couple of hours before this meeting.
All right.
I did.
Yeah, I understand the issue. I didn't go into the fine detail, but I certainly scanned it.
So, in the interest of time, being that we only have an hour and a half for our meetings, I think it's important that we all take the time to be well prepared and ready to have considered and cogent discussions on these items. I have teed up two very specific actions under new business. Those two very specific actions were articulated in the email that I sent out to everyone. Now, if we are prepared to discuss those two precise actions, one that deals with how bona fide resident status is determined by the use of a lease and rental license, and the other to encourage Alderwoman Tierney to amend the fine schedule to incorporate a fine for not displaying the residential permit. If we're prepared to discuss those two new items tonight, then let's do so in the next 12 minutes. If we're not prepared to discuss and act on those two items tonight, then let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting so everyone will have the opportunity to read all of the context and the background that goes with these two items. Are we prepared to discuss them in the next 12 minutes? or shall we just add them to the agenda for the next meeting?
I would recommend that we add them to the next meeting to provide a longer time frame. Not only is the intricacy of the legislation there, but the issue is a very deep-seated one for Ward 1 and parking. And I think that certainly in my frame, in my Zoom frame, I will have some comments to make about the neighborhood and the issue of parking and legislation and fees in regard to it. So let's give ourselves more time to understand it as well as to discuss it.
And Tom, if I may, both of these could be real hornet's nests, and I'd rather not rush to kick them. And now, you know, maybe we have to, but you know, when you have to kick the hornet's nest, you got to be ready for the hornets when they come streaming out of it. And not being a Ward 1 person and not being familiar with life on the ground at an intimate level there, you know, I could see where these are tricky and difficult issues. I think we need to tread lightly. And, you know, I'm, for one, was not a fan of the whole STVR legislation. I'm, you know, more of a live and let live kind of guy on that front. But yeah, we got to tread carefully with this one.
What is STVR? That was
Short-term vacation
Short-term rentals.
Thank you.
Short-term vacation rentals.
Got
And
it.
as Dave has said, these are very thorny issues, but they're also very, very precise issues that deal with precise language in the law. So while I can appreciate the feelings of residents, this is the type of challenge that the board, under our duties, is to help the city in administering their law and their policies. So I do agree that this requires, I've been doing this now for about 4 years, probably among the residents of Annapolis, or at least in Ward 1, I probably know way more about the residential parking program than any human being should. So it takes a level of effort and a level of understanding by all of the board members in knowing exactly what we would be doing with the city, because we would be asking the city to take responsibility. We would be asking the city to take an action and then be consistent in the application of the law. So as much as, you know, when I sent this out, I hope that I gave everybody enough background that you could become familiar with the particular items. What I would propose to do over the next, the interim, I would be delighted to take your questions and try to virtually educate the entire board on these two topics before we come back next month and have the discussion on the agenda items. Does that make sense?
The only problem with that, Tom, is it's not a give and take. In other words, we're not talking like we all are here and one person discussion kicks somebody else off. Certainly anybody can ask questions and you can answer to everyone, hopefully, when you write them out. But I don't think it's going to knock out discussion.
So there are two very specific items in that email. So if the questions were to address those two specific items, then I do believe we could have an adequate give and take.
I have a question.
Sure, Kara.
I have a question outside of these two items. Now, I did skim what you sent, and I also saw the attachment that was your exchange with Hillary Raftovich. And I can tell from the conversation here and from your exchange with her that, yeah, this is a really thorny issue. In addition to getting the city to actually enforce their policy, should we as a board also perhaps make a recommendation on what they can do with, it seems like around 188 people who are potentially parking during a short span of time. So giving some kind of recommendation beyond just enforcing the policy. Like you could park them here.
So the conversations we've had relative to the accommodating state legislators is to do it in a way like it's legislated in the District of Columbia. Their code specifically allows for residential parking for members of Congress and their staff when Congress is in session. So if the city of Annapolis chose to do this correctly, then they would simply amend the code and make the accommodation for the state legislature when the legislature is in session. That is certainly a discussion that we can have. And I do believe that Alderwoman Tierney would be amenable to sponsoring that type of legislation, which would amend the code. So we can be tactical in some things because we've identified existing problems that deserve an immediate solution. And then we can be more strategic to address that long-term problem. Interestingly, though, legislators are provided parking by the General Services Administration for the state of Maryland when the legislature is in session. This example that I cited with Hillary was unique in that it showed an ambiguity in the law. Not that a legislator was being accommodated, but that the law was ambiguous to where there was a question as to whether a privilege was legitimately extended. Was this individual a bona fide resident? So there's very precise law here, and all I'm looking for is for the city, where necessary, to follow the existing law, or if it needs to be amended to make it clear, then we will work with the city to do just that.
Any other discussion on this item? The sentiment that I've heard so far is that it is important and deserving of additional attention. Am I reading the audience correctly?
Yeah, yes, we can't duck this. Because I think I agree with Tom. This is part of our responsibility to deal with stuff like this. And I'm fine, Tom, if you and I want to have a conversation in between now and next meeting, and you want to give me some background on this that I might not have, I'd be happy to do that. But I agree with you. We can't just pass on this. We can't just pretend it's not there.
If I may,
Indeed.
let me encourage everyone in the email I embedded links to the city code, the specific citations that deal with the residential parking program. Any discussion we have relative to that program would be within the context of what the code says. And I have to encourage everyone, as part of a further discussion, to first become familiar with what the rules are and what the city has already established as the rule set. And then you may better understand how, through nod, nod, or wink, wink, the city doesn't enforce their own rule set. And that's all we'd like to see.
All right. Well, I sense that we've gone as far as we can for the moment. And thank you so much, Tom, for kicking this off. If there is no new business, adjournment may be in order.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Thank you so much for your participation. And thanks to Tom for kicking us in the backside. We have some work to do. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.